The Turkish lira rallied around 2% against the dollar on Thursday. That's after the central bank hiked its key interest rate for the third time in less than 2 months. It was the bank's last monetary policy meeting before the country holds elections on June the 24th. The bank raised its benchmark rate by 125 basis points to 17.75%. That's 2 weeks after the bank implemented a 300 basis point emergency rate hike to stabilize the lira. The currency has been under pressure. It's lost 15% so far this year, although it has recovered from a record low of nearly 5 lira against the dollar, which it hit just last month. Turkey's inflation rate came in at above 12% in May due to higher oil prices and the lira's recent weakening. The government and the central bank say controlling inflation remains a top priority. Now, TRT World's senior business producer Mobin Nasir joins me now in the studio. Mobin, great to have you here on set. Now, what will investors be saying about this decision? Are they happy?
It's definitely a surprise, both in terms of its timing and the magnitude, and it's definitely good news for investors. Look, we were looking at what analysts were expecting prior to the announcement. About half and half is what the view was in terms of the interest rate being kept where it was and a hike, but really nobody was expecting a hike of this magnitude. Just to put it into perspective, as you mentioned, inflation is about 12.5%. This puts the cost of borrowing significantly higher than that. And in essence, really, the central bank is not following those numbers anymore. It's rather leading the rate. And that really should be a sign of confidence for investors.
Okay, and that's for investors, but what does this mean for the overall economy then?
Of course, what we've seen in the immediate aftermath is not just the lira rallying, but also stocks have registered an improvement. Of course, banking stocks are the ones that will gain most. We've seen just today about almost 4% on average increase in their prices. And most importantly, I think, if you look at the yields, they're really turning directions now. So that seems to suggest that there is a fundamental shift in the view over the country. Of course, in terms of markets always rely on emotions, right? It's not just about numbers. And there is a big election coming up. There is a lot of uncertainty in the air. So certainly in the short term, we can expect some volatility. But in terms of the fundamentals and the longer term sort of play out of economic fundamentals, this is definitely a move that should give confidence not just to foreign investors, but also to domestic companies that have been really calling for more clarity and a more sort of stable outlook from the central bank.
Mm-hmm. So we've heard what the central bank has done, but what about the government?
Well, of course, the government has been working on making sure that it can provide cheaper loans where it needs, even as it pushes that rate up. And we've seen a lot of government investments or government-backed investments going into especially construction and other sectors also. And then, of course, there's the private sector too. We've seen just in the past 1 week, about $500 million being invested through foreign direct investment, as opposed to the really sort of high velocity funds coming in and out of the exchange, out of the stock exchanges. So it's those kind of investments that the government needs to be targeting, and those are the ones that will effectively give more stability over the longer run. They really don't need to worry too much about what the indexes do over the next day or so. Especially given the heightened noise over politics. I think the focus really appears to be, and should be rightly so, on the longer term sort of stability of the external accounts.
Mm-hmm. And talking long term, what will this mean for economic growth long term?
Well, the growth targets, of course, may have to be revised downwards. The higher cost of borrowing does take an impact on some activity, but as we've seen, the base that the economy is working on is fairly strong, right? We've seen a lot of growth, not just in construction, but also in the large-scale sort of projects, both from the government side and also from the private sector. So those should help maintain momentum in the economy. Having said that, there should be some tapering, and perhaps it won't be as high as we have seen in the past, perhaps a few months.
Okay, Mobin, thank you so much. Mobin Nasir, TRT World's senior business producer.